So earlier this evening, I was working out with a workout partner of mine, someone I usually hit the gym with, also a friend of mine outside of the gym. But he asked me about someone who he hasn't seen in a while, and it's a friend of both of ours, but he is going through a divorce and a custody battle at the moment. And I kind of gave him details about the situation, only because if he were there in the room, he would have told him the same thing. The guy's very open with his friends and people close to him. And of course, he was asking me the honest reason as to why he hasn't been going to the gym, kind of been missing in action, whatever you want to call it. I mean, the guy's in and out of court probably 2-3 days a week. And I explained him kind of the situation. What he told me was actually something very similar about a friend that he knows, who basically what this girl did was she had gotten a divorce with him. They had a kid together. She was getting child support, and she had a restraining order against the man. And she knew the places that he would be, obviously through mutual friends, family, that kind of stuff. And she would show up to these events and call the police and try to make it sound like he's breaking or breaching the no contact order, the restraining order, and use the system against him. So it's crazy to me how so many men I've talked to have come across this similar circumstance, whether it's from their own experience, whether it's from people they know, family members, brothers, people like that. And I was just getting to thinking this whole thing with marriage, because if you would have asked me this question back when I was 18 years old, I would have told you that by now I would have thought it would be ideal to be married. Of course, I wasn't as experienced with relationships or dating and stuff like that, but I would have thought, based on my parents' generation, which anyone who's within Gen Z millennial, it's pretty likely your parents got married at an earlier age, maybe in their early 20s, even in some cases, mid-20s. And that's not such a common thing anymore. And kind of what I've come to is that the days of traditional marriage are pretty much gone, at least here, at least in the Western world, whatever you want to call it. And even when I think about it, the girls I've dated in the past, the only girl that I would say seemingly was promising or seemed like they could even be seen as relationship material, whatever you want to call it, was not a girl who was born in America. She was from another country. Now, again, even with that, you never know. I've heard of situations where some women are better at hiding it than others, putting on a mask. Even men that are very experienced still falling for it. So you never know what that would have led to. But again, I was young and naive at the time. I actually personally messed up that relationship, and I take responsibility for it. But that's still besides the point as to why so many men don't want to get married, and why so many men who are married are recommending that men don't do it. They don't repeat that. And of course, we've all heard the reasons, the high divorce rate. We've heard of stuff like that. We've heard of the legal and financial risks. Like I even knew someone who was in the Puyallup area, which is south of downtown Seattle, about an hour and a half south. And this guy was 70 years old. And he had divorced with his wife at the time. And they had to sell the house and split the money on the house sale. And then he also had to split his 401k with her. So there is real risks, legal and financial ramifications. Of course, historically, child support being awarded to the mother. A lot of the time, should I even say most of the time, an overwhelming majority of the time that I've seen. And I want to make this point. I'm going to get into a story about a friend of mine who I actually had talked to before making this video out of respect. And he said it'd be okay for me to share the story. But I've talked about in previous videos that there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. You could solve being lonely from taking up hobbies, all different kinds of stuff where you're going to meet people. It's not hard to meet people. But I want to make this point too. There's a difference between being lonely and being miserable. And if you're with a toxic woman, if you're having a woman, like I mentioned earlier, making all these false allegations, trying to ruin your life, trying to take you and take half your money, the financial and legal risks, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be absolutely miserable. So with this friend of mine, he's someone who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a couple of years now, and I've actually never met him in person. He's in a different state, but I connected with him through some mutual friends of ours. They actually grew up with him, and he's an awesome dude. We connected on a bunch of different subjects and stuff like that, so we talk pretty regularly. It's really the only reason that I even have Instagram is so I can talk to him over DM and not have to call or text, just because it's a little bit more convenient, just a voice message and stuff like that. video calls, whatever you want to call it. But I came to find out that he was actually married and he had gotten divorced. And the reason why he had gotten divorced is because a family member of his who was on an iPad saw pictures of his wife with another man that she was cheating on him with. And essentially through the whole cloud thing, right, where it shares pictures with the phone, with the tablet, with the laptop, that's how he found these pictures. I mean, you could imagine how crazy that is. You're going through your tablet and whatever you're doing on it, and you see these pictures, probably from the wife's phone, I would imagine, that just pop up on there. So they're divorced. He's, of course, having to deal with personal stuff after a divorce, which pretty much you sign these kind of obligations, and those kind of things happen. But the reason why I wanted to mention this story is because people need to come to terms that these aren't the days and ages of women just being princesses that you think they are. Like, I would imagine there were probably some red flags, but it was a shock to him to find those pictures, which led to the divorce. Like, even there was someone I knew who was a childhood best friend of mine, actually. And we had a little bit of a falling out. I'm going to, again, with this, I want to explain why it is so important to avoid toxic women and not be naive to this. But when we were around the ages of 20, 21, we had a falling out because I'd helped him get a job. And he ended up getting fired over something very silly, very foolish, very avoidable, and it made me look bad, put my reputation on the line to help him get the job. So I didn't talk to him for a number of years after that, but again, that's besides the point. He's a very close friend of mine now. He's someone I talk to regularly. And again, times change, people change, and he certainly has changed since then. Like I said, the whole thing was silly anyway. Could have been summed up as a big misunderstanding. But during those few years that we didn't talk, he had gotten in some very toxic relationships and had gotten into certain substances because of those toxic relationships, from what he explained to me. Now, he is currently married, and his wife is having a kid. They're going to be having a son soon. And I pray and hope that all goes well with that. It seems like they're in a good kind of situation right now in terms of boundaries and stuff like that, respect. But those few years that he was with those toxic women really took a toll on him. It really took a toll on him. Abuse, all different kinds of stuff. And again, even things like physical abuse. People want to make it seem like it can never happen to a man. Best bet it can happen. I've heard many circumstances of that. Even things like International Men's Day, there's crickets. You don't really see, really at all, those kind of things being celebrated. And one thing I will say too, health and in particular stress are something that is not a joke. It's not to be played with. It can lead to so many bad things, just having the stress and your health be out of control. I mean, again, people do need to come to terms with this, that when you make a woman your whole world, especially if she's a toxic woman, especially if you think she's some innocent princess or you can fix her and that kind of stuff, it's going to end very badly. Very, very badly. And even I remember a while back, I used to go out with a couple of friends. We would go to the local restaurants in the area. And there was a girl there who was a waitress, and she was in some long-distance relationship with a boyfriend of hers who was actually in the military. He was in the army. And she even was saying that she was going to be engaged with him, and she was going to move to New York, near where he is kind of stationed in the base. Yet she's on the other side of the country here in Washington. And she was trying to flirt with my friend at the restaurant because she wanted attention and validation. It's like they don't see the man as a person. They don't see them as relational. They see them as, like I've talked about in a previous video, as transactional. The attention, the validation, the basically narcissistic supply. just to have a man chasing them. I mean, essentially what she was doing was monkey branching. And I told my friend, I said, dude, if this girl has a boyfriend, you should not be talking to her. And he stopped doing that. He's the same way as me. He found out that she had a boyfriend because she slipped up when she was talking to him. She said something about some guy finding her on Instagram and blah, blah, and then she slipped up saying that she has a boyfriend, right? Yet she was making all these moves and compliments to my friend who was there. And what was so crazy was, because this was a restaurant we would go to regularly, her boyfriend came back from the army and was visiting the state of Washington. He was actually there in the restaurant. And she went up to my friend and hugged him when he walked in the restaurant with her man, their boyfriend, whatever he's supposed to be to her. And you asked me personally, long-distance relationships, especially at a younger age, they're bound to fall apart. I mean, I personally just think it's a recipe for disaster. If you ask me, I've known some friends who have been in long-distance relationships and they all fell apart. But this is just absolutely crazy. It's absolutely crazy how a lot of men, they get desperate and they get with women like this. And how a lot of women that are in those relationships, they don't respect the man. They don't respect marriage or the fundamental of even being loyal to one person. Like even on the dating apps, when I used to use those a while back, which I'm to the point right now where I've gone back on them, I think a couple of years ago, just for the heck of it, just for the fun of it, whatever you want to call it, just to kind of see what the dating market was like, because I hadn't been in a relationship in some time. And I kind of wanted to see where things were. And it got to the point where I would get matches on these dating apps and I would just look at them and I would be almost like exhausted. I would not want to continue the interaction, the engagement, the planning dates or anything, because it just felt superficial. It just felt fake. I knew, based on my own experiences, based on other people's experiences, it's very unlikely. And I would even argue on a dating app, next to really impossible, that it was going to lead anywhere of significance. And you ask me personally, I'm not with this sleeping around with women and this kind of stuff. If it's not a woman that I could see myself marrying or introducing my parents, stuff like that, like I've talked about before, it's completely it's a complete waste of my time. Again, that's a problem with lust. If there's men who cannot control those urges, and I've known people that have destroyed their lives because of lust. They've gotten women pregnant that they didn't want to get pregnant off even a one-night stand. And now they're stuck paying child support. Now they're stuck with multiple women that they've had kids with. So that's something that, again, a lot of men need to understand as well. That it's true that there's a lot of women nowadays that are not worth looking at seriously, taking seriously. But not only should you not date them, you shouldn't do anything with them. Nothing physical at all. Like I have friends of mine who, they still do that stuff. It's a vice of theirs, and I hope they get over it. But it's not going to lead anywhere good. And deep down, they know that. And when they're humble enough to admit that even, which I respect them for. It's something they need to work on. It is a vice that they need to beat. They need to work on. Because I don't want to see them get a woman pregnant. And now they're out of pocket 18 years, $500 to $1,000 a month, like I've seen so many men deal with. All because of a mistake in the span of a few minutes. Again, these things have potential lifelong consequences. Like I even was talking to someone, they said they had been divorced in the 1980s. And even 40 years later, in the 2020s, the girl is still trying to make contact with the man. So my point being is, back then, he might have not thought so much about it. But even 40 years later, there are still consequences and ramifications for those actions. She's still hitting him up. She's still trying to play games, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if they had a kid together. I didn't ask. But I would imagine that it's probably not so easy to completely cut contact with a person because of contractual obligations, kids, whatever you want to call it. Like, I'm sure we've all dealt with a toxic friend in the past. I'm sure we've all dealt with even a toxic relationship, toxic girlfriend in the past. And you can break up with them. You can distance yourself and set boundaries with them. But once marriage is involved, once you get to know the families of one another, once there's kids involved especially, it is not so easy to distance yourself from those toxic people. And that's why it's so important for men to have good discernment. That's why it's so important for men to not let their guard down. Like when I was younger, when I was 18, I didn't know much of anything about life. There was a girl I was talking to in community college, and she was being very flirtatious, whatever you want to call it. And this girl was just sleeping around. I found out that she was with multiple different dudes, cheating on guys while in relationships, doing all this weird stuff. Yet you would think, but she was a girl out of college, and I actually met her in the library. A lot of people, when you talk to them, they talk about, where do you meet a high-value woman? Where do you meet a woman that's worth taking seriously? A lot of the times they'll probably say stuff like library, college, those kind of places, right? Places where women want to learn and stuff. But I'll be upfront. Something I've come to find is a lot of women who go to college, they've been indoctrinated by this kind of toxicity, by the kind of garbage that we all probably put up if we went to the kind of upbringing publicly and stuff with school. Because I remember when I was in school, there was a lot of this kind of men are toxic, men are this, a lot of that kind of garbage. So in many ways, that could actually be somewhat of a detriment. Now, I'm not saying women shouldn't go to college. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that you can't just be naive and think, oh, but if a girl's in college, or if a girl's in a library, or if a girl's going to this place, or she's taking care of herself and goes to the gym or eats healthy and goes to the premier grocery store, that doesn't automatically mean it's a free ride, that she's a woman worth marrying or taking seriously. That doesn't mean that at all. Regardless of where she is or meet her, and I'm saying you shouldn't waste your time at bars, nightclubs, dating apps, but regardless of where it is, you have to have your guard up, because you cannot let stuff like this happen to you. You can't let yourself be destroyed by toxic women. You can't let them run amok in your personal life, in your financial life, in your work life. Don't let them do it, folks. I see them, they'll even try to isolate you from friends, from family. You don't know how long you're going to have those people. Even, the other day, my little brother had gotten in a car accident. Now, thankfully, he's okay. Thankfully, he didn't get injured at all. The car is pretty much trashed. But my point being is, you never know when those people could be gone. The last thing you want to do is have a toxic person try to pull you away from them. So, as always, guys, I appreciate you viewing the video. I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.